Today, I am excited to welcome Dr. Daniel Raffi to the podcast. Dr. Raffi is a sports neurologist and traumatic brain injury physician based in Southern California. He completed his adult neurology residency at Hackensack JFK Medical Center in New Jersey and went on to receive advanced training through the prestigious UCLA Brain Sport Fellowship in Sports Neurology and Traumatic Brain Injury. So currently, Dr. Raffi is the host of the wonderful UCLA Brain Sport podcast, which I highly encourage you to check out, where he dives into topics around brain health, injury management, and performance optimization, featuring insights from leading experts and athletes alike. His expertise lies in concussion management with a focus on innovative intervention techniques, and he's actively researching the therapeutic approaches, including the potential benefits of CBD for concussion recovery. Do you think PTSD could be brought on more so today by the way maybe kids are growing up? And I am thinking not just the household situations we mentioned, like the two parents could be a big one, a good environment, but also factors like online gaming. Now I see them more, they're isolated to themselves, even though they can probably chat virtually. But versus maybe the old school, like getting out into the community or being involved in more social support networks, including sport.
Yeah, so let me just say social support is one of the biggest factors and predictors of post-traumatic stress disorder, both prior to and after the actual traumatic event, right? And what's interesting that's been noticed is positive support can improve the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and potentially avoid the development of post-traumatic stress disorder. But I think the evidence is more robust for the flip side of it, meaning negative social support is much more harming for post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms and the development of post-traumatic stress disorder than potentially the protective effects of a positive social support. So my sense would be the most important thing to do is if you're in a negative social support context after you suffered a traumatic event, one of the most important steps moving forward would be to extricate yourself as much as possible from a potentially negative social support system. You bring up the video gaming and isolation, and I can certainly see that perspective. But when you and I grew up, the whole gaming and our social network wasn't really online and it wasn't really around gaming. Like my social support or my social network gaming would be like, we have playing on one computer and my brother's playing and I'm next to him just trying to, be involved with the gaming process. And it was more of an in-person thing. But I think I would be cautious about saying, okay, these kids are just isolating themselves when in fact, a lot of their social network is online and is through this whole gaming apparatus. And I say that, for example, like bringing it back to a different pathology like brain injury, right? So screen time has been something that is really up for debate as far as after you had a brain injury, right? So like after you have a concussion, how should we moderate screen time? Should we say no screen time at all? Should we say, yeah, go ahead, have all the screen time you want? And one of the big factors in the conversation of moderating people's screen time would be, well, what are we going to tell kids to not be on their phones now? And what they've been finding is that can worsen kids' anxiety because their social network is attached to their phone, right? And you're isolating them even more by telling them no screen time, right? So I wonder what translating that to like a PTSD like sort of picture would look like.
I fully acknowledge that, and that's actually a good point that their social network is now solely online. So by removing that, like, yes, you could be increasing their anxiety levels and probably exacerbating the issue a small bit. What about, the way social media platforms would say like your TikToks and your Instagrams are dopamine hits, and definitely not pulling research from anywhere here, but in terms of the kind of quick scrolling, or people would associate it with having a short-term memory or not being able to focus, would that be detrimental to after brain injuries or anything?
Yeah, I think like leave out the whole brain injury piece. We know that being on these social media sites is absolutely terrible for people's mental health, especially people that are predisposed to mental illness, like girls aged 12 to 16 years old, for example. I don't know if you've seen the graph regarding the rate of suicides versus when social media hit the iPhone. Have you ever seen that?
I'd say I vaguely came across it, but I definitely didn't take time
Yeah,
to
I
focus
mean,
in on it.
you and whoever listens to this podcast absolutely needs to go on Google, look for this graph. It's basically suicidality among the age group I just described over the years, and then it has a tick where, social media hit the iPhone, and there's a almost vertical spike in suicide in that age group. And I just think it's very difficult to explain away that finding other than, you have children that are comparing themselves to other people constantly and basically having a sense of worthlessness about themselves because of what they feel that they should be.
Yeah.
And that leads to the ramifications that we see in that graph.
That's
So just
frightening.
in and of itself, just that is enough for me to say, hey, social media isn't good. And we can get into the nuances of, what that does to your cognition as it relates to enhanced distractibility, it being, this sort of dopamine hit and the addictive properties of being on social media. And certainly those are also factors involved. But at the end of the day, that graph is enough for me to say it's probably not the best thing.
Yeah, I think if you relied on that alone, it's definitely a strong indicator that something's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
We mentioned about social support, briefly touched on kind of if someone was gaming and like social support networks are all online now. In your opinion, do you think there is an added advantage to being in person with someone versus solely online?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of cues, cognitive cues that we take from, and cognitive and interactive cues that we take from being in person, right? Both facial expressions as well as postures and things like that, that we take from an in-person interaction that we just can't take via a video interaction,
Yeah.
right? And developmentally, that's part of the process of learning what these sort of facial expressions and what these postures mean, right? And then based off of that, then we adjust our behavior so that in the future when we see those things, we understand them better and we know what socially to be able to do with that input and that stimulus, right? If it's just being done strictly online, that's why you see it like these dating apps, right? Like you go and you see this person, you swipe right, and then you end up meeting them in person, and then you have this sort of awkward conversation and you don't really know how to understand each other or what questions to ask, and you begin to feel anxious and you want to get out of there, right? At least that's like for the people that I talk to that are in online dating world, that is usually their experience with the whole online dating. And I think that has a lot to do with it, right? It's like you're just interacting online the whole time, right? You're looking at videos, you're comparing yourself to other people, you're not understanding social cues or expressions or postures and how you should understand them and what you should do about them. So I think there's definitely deficits involved with doing everything online.